Alrighty, so the goal of this video is to make sure that we have event listeners on all of our buttons that are going to be passing the value into our display here. Alright, so the very first thing we're going to do is we're actually going to jump back into the HTML and we're going to replace this long number here with just a 0. Okay, and we can save that. And now we're going to jump over to the JavaScript and we're going to create some constants for our elements. So first, we're going to create a const of calculator display, capital D on display, equals document dot query selector. And in this case, we're actually going to use single quotes and we're just going to select our H1 element. So if you remember from our HTML just a second ago, we were targeting this H1. We can do this because this is the only H1 within the project. Next, we're going to create a constant for our input buttons. So input BTNS for short, capital B there, equals document dot, and then this time we're going to use query selector all. So I'm going to click the down arrow, press enter, and then in brackets, single quotes, we want to target all of our button elements. So that's going to return an array of all of our buttons. We'll then need to filter through to make sure we're assigning the right event listeners, but we'll get to that later. The last one will be our constant for our clear button. So again, BTN, capital B, equals document dot. This one will be get element by ID, bracket, single quote, and then we're going to target our clear dash BTN ID. Okay, next we're going to need to create a function that we're going to modify later, but for now we just want to console log the parameter that we're going to pass from our event listener. So we're going to create the function first. So our function is going to be called send number value, and it's going to take a parameter of number. And then inside of that, we're just going to console.log our number variable. Okay, so now we're actually going to need to create event listeners for all of our buttons. So instead of one by one writing it out, we can do this a little bit more dynamically thanks to our query selector all. So first, we're just going to console.log our input buttons so I can show you what I mean. So if we save this and jump back, so we can see our value now is 0 as well. And if we inspect and we go to the console, we see that we have a node list with 17 items. If we expand it, we can see that we have all of our buttons here, and when we hover over them, you can actually see that each one gets highlighted. So you can see that we have our buttons up here that have the operator class, and our button equal sign also has the operator class. We can see that all of our number values have no class, so we can use that to target our number buttons. And then we can also see that our decimal has the decimal class, so we'll use that to target that specifically. Okay, so now we can go back to our code and we can delete this console here, and we can now comment out a title. This is going to add event listeners for numbers, operators, and decimal buttons. Okay, so what we're going to do is we have an array, our input buttons array. We're going to use a for each here, for each. So this is going to run a function for each item within our array. So we're going to create another bracket, and this is going to create a local variable called input button. Notice that it is singular. That's on purpose. And then we're going to space, and then we're going to use an arrow function here, and then add the curly brackets, press enter, and then we'll add a semicolon here at the bottom. Now, we're going to need to use a series of conditional statements in order to filter through and get the right buttons that we want. So the first one is an if statement. If the input button, so this is the singular button, dot class list dot length equals 0. So this will be the case for our number buttons because it does not have a CSS class assigned to it. Then we want to target that input button, and we want to add an event listener, bracket, single quote, we want to target the click event, comma, and then we want to pass in our send number value function, and we want to pass in the parameter of the input button dot value. So if you remember in our HTML, we set all of these up to have values. So that's what we're targeting with our event listener, and that's what we're actually going to pass through. Because you can see here our value for our division operator is a slash, which is what we use in JavaScript, but we are displaying a different value to the user. So we want that value. All right, so we can have a semicolon there. Next, we're going to have an else if statement. And then this time, input button again, and class list again. But this time we're going to do dot contains, and this is going to check if any of the buttons have a specific class. So I'm going to have a set of brackets here, single quote, and then operator. So this is going to pull any buttons with the operator class, and we'll have our curly brackets in here. And we're actually going to copy this for now, but later on, each of these are going to point to different functions, but for right now, we'll just point them all to one function. And actually, we can copy this entire thing here for the next one, paste that below, and this time, instead of operator, we want to see if it contains the decimal class, and in this one, we actually don't need the input value. Alrighty. So let's save that now and check it out. Okay, so something weird here is happening within our console. We were supposed to add event listeners so that when we click, it console logs, but we can see that it is just having all of them all at once. So we need to be able to fix this. I would challenge you to pause the video here and see if you can figure out what we missed. Okay. Welcome back. I will show you exactly what we missed. So if we go back, we actually needed to implement a function here that will then call this function in order to pass in the value correctly. So we can actually use our multi-select here. So remember our Command D in Mac, Control D Windows, you see all three are selected. And then I'm going to use the left cursor to go to the left. And then I'm just going to have a bracket, space, and then our arrow function, and then that is now having a function here that is then calling this function with the actual value of the button. And then that button will get passed in here as this parameter of number, and then we will console log it. But this should only now happen when we actually click on the button. So let's save that and jump back. Okay, so that's definitely a better start. We can see that there's nothing in our console yet. And if we click on 7, we can see now it is populating. So we can click on all of our different buttons here, and we can see that we're logging the value. And you can see for our multiplication, we're logging the asterisk, not the X. Excellent. All right, so now we can jump back. And instead of console logging the number, I actually want to show the number in our display. So in order to do that, we're going to target our calculator display constant dot text content. So this is going to provide the actual text that's going to be in our element. So it's going to replace our 0 value here. And this is going to be equal to the number that we are passing in. So let's save that now and check it out. Alrighty, so now when we press our button, it should change the display. All right, perfect. So we have the number 7 in there. Excellent. But if we press another number, we can see that it just replaces whatever value is in there. So that's not what we want. We only want to replace the value if the value is 0. And if not, we want to actually add the numbers together to create a bigger number. So let's jump back to the code and see how we can fix that. So we're going to need to modify our send number value function, and we can comment out a title that will show what we're going to do. So if the current display value is 0, we want to replace it. If not, we want to add number. So we're going to create a new constant for display value. And this is going to be equal to our calculator display.textContent. And then on the line below, we're going to call our calculator display text content, and we're going to set the value of this. And to do this, we're going to use a ternary operator, which I've mentioned before. And this time we're going to use the display value equals, so 3 equal signs, and then single quotes 0. So this means that if our display value is 0, question mark, then we want to just have the text content be equal to the number like we had before, meaning we're going to replace 0 with just the number, or we're going to separate the next expression with the colon. We want the display value plus the number. Okay, so we can use our word wrap here, Alt-Z, so that we can see everything here. So just to go over it one more time, if the display value is equal to 0, then we're going to replace it with just the number. We're going to replace this text content with just the number. If the display value is not 0, we're going to add the display value plus the number to create a bigger number. All right, so let's save that and check it out. Okay, so we enter one number, and if we enter another number, it should add another number. Perfect. So we're able to add multiple numbers together. Awesome. It would be nice if we could actually get this clear button to work, so we'll tackle that in the next video. If I just refresh it though, if we go to add a decimal, we can see that it's undefined. So we actually need, for now, to keep passing in the input value, even though later on we won't need to pass in a value. So we'll save that and jump back. And now you can see we have our decimal. But the problem is if we keep pressing it, we're adding in more decimals than we can have. So we can really only have one decimal. So we'll need to fix that as well. So we'll tackle both of those things, the reset functionality and the decimal functionality, in our next video. I'll see you in that one. Bye for now.